Hello again, Howie Marlin for Addiction Got a Minute. It's November 21st, the day before Thanksgiving, and 2018. The show you're about to see is the first show that Michael and I did. We wanted to see how it felt, and we didn't launch it until after the second show aired. So it's a little out of sequence, but I'm sure you'll enjoy it nonetheless. For now, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Addiction Got a Minute. I'm Howie Marlin, and I'm here with my co-host Michael Blanchard. We came up with an idea of starting to talk about things on the island that concerned us. We've been both working in the substance abuse industry here for a while. We've been spinning our wheels in different areas, but a lot of time spinning in the same direction. So we started to connect and realized that we have a lot that we can share. So I'm here today with the hopes of inspiring folks to take action. We've been hit with a lot of pain, some of it worse than others, on a national scale and very much on a local scale. So I want to start by saying I'm Howie Marlin, resident of the island for 25 years. I'm LADC1, a licensed drug alcohol counselor, and I've worked on the island both for our local community services agency as well as the hospital, and now have a private practice. I also am an interventionist serving our community as well as outside of our community. So I'd like to introduce everybody to Michael Blanchard. Good morning, my friend.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm Mike Blanchard, and I've been on the island full-time now since October of last year, but I've been coming back and forth for the last 12 years. This is my place. And I am a photographer, gallery owner, but I also am in recovery. And I've been sober now for 8 years, and I decided to take it one step further, and got a master's in psychology with a focus on substance use disorder, and have been working for Island Healthcare in learning the systems here on the island as far as helping patients that need help with substance use or mental health services find those services on an island, which is separate from the mainland. So it creates issues in terms of finding adequate resources. So I've researched rehabs and clinicians, and it's been a really rewarding experience. And so do a little bit of everything, I think. So.
Well, the things that you have been doing have been paying off. People speak highly about you, about the efforts that you do. Of course, your work over at the Equestrian Center.
Yeah, I'm now, I volunteer as the president of Misty Meadows Equestrian Center, where we're trying to build programs. We're getting all of the folks that work there certified to be therapeutic riding instructors. So there's something about standing next to a horse, and sometimes people with addictions or mental health issues need some connection point, and sometimes people aren't always the answer. And we're really excited about putting programs together from helping like with Camp Jabberwocky, people with MS, autism, but also how can we work it in for addiction and mental health issues. And so we're starting from the ground floor, going into 2019, trying to come up with some creative programs. I'm really excited about it. I don't know how to ride a horse, but I mean, really, that's my hidden motive, is that I just want to ride. I want to ride a horse, so I'll do anything for that.
Really?
I rode once and I looked like an idiot. Okay.
Well, we all look like idiots getting on the horses. Yeah. You should know that I brought Jenny, my wife, to Misty Meadows just about 2 weeks ago, and introduced her to the program, and it's fantastic. I mean, Jenny lives on all the Animal Planet shows, if there's a veterinary show, we're watching it. So this affinity and wanting to be around animals, and then when you get to literally stand next to these horses and feel their absolute acceptance of you, and they're in the here and now state of mind. There's things there. Yeah. And I'm glad that you're into it, and I really do look forward to getting more involved with it. We'll talk, hopefully, about things like this and a lot more in the future. Cool. There are so many issues to talk about and things which are so important to us here on the island. But before we get into the specifics of the island, let's just talk about some basic numbers. I don't know if you guys are aware, but let me just touch on it. The National Survey on Drug and Health says that 21.5 million Americans and older have battled an addiction issue, substance disorder. 80% of them on alcohol, 7 million struggling with drugs. 1 out of every 8 people who suffer from drug use disorder also suffer from both alcohol and drug abuse simultaneously. SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, published that in 2014, almost 8 million adults battled both mental health and substance abuse disorders, or what they call co-occurring disorders. And in my humble opinion, there is rarely a time that I've seen someone who is struggling with a substance issue that doesn't also have a mental health issue. It's the chicken and egg thing. It's really awkward because when you start working in the field with folks who are struggling with trauma-related issues that are overtly there for us to talk about or not, they do merge. Let me just cover the rest of these. The Office of National Drug Control Policy reports that drug abuse and addiction costs Americans almost $200 billion in healthcare, criminal justice, legal, and lost workplace production. You know, this will be one of the subjects I'll be wanting to talk about. How much money we expend on addressing these issues when there's so much money being made by the tobacco, alcohol, and drug companies.
Yes.
And there's got to be a way that we'll be able to direct that interests and funding. I don't have a clue how to do it. I've got some dreams, and maybe we'll talk about them.
Well, and I think you and I see it firsthand. It's almost as if it's kind of an odd game show where there's limited resources and then you pit people against each other for those limited resources. You have a situation where there are many, many that need help and there's not enough funding to go around, and the centers that have the responsibility of helping you are so understaffed. The people get paid at the lowest ends of the spectrum, and then we wonder why there's so much repeat, folks needing to go to rehab multiple times. I had actually read through some notes that you had made before we came in today, and you were suggesting that is there a way to fund, a creative way to be able to put some of the industry money towards the funding of treatment. So if you're a vodka producer, do we take a percentage and put it towards people who end up going down the bad path, and raising some creative options in terms of getting taxes or something that help deal with the massive issue that's out there? It's a good question. I don't know what the answer is.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of the things that, as I've been doing my work over the last couple of years, what became blatantly evident was the fact that these people are making so much money off of it. And don't get me wrong, we live in America, free enterprise and all that, that's great. If you can make money off of your business, wonderful, more power to you. But when you make your money off of your business, off the lives of other people, we have to talk. And one of the things which has really hurt is this long understood problem with tobacco, that these tobacco companies sell a product which kills people, or better yet for them, doesn't kill them. It just makes them sick enough so that they are still dependent on their product. And then when they lose their potential for profitability, they're allowed to die. No, I don't know this for a fact. It's something that my heart says maybe exists. I don't know. Think about it. Then let's talk about alcohol. Okay, it's always been in our society, and for those of you that have been in the programs that I've been associated with, this is something that I talk about every class, that alcohol has been in cultures around the world for millennia. From the first time the caveman, starving to death, found a pool of slop in the corner and out of desperation ate that slop and got quite a buzz and went, woo! Well, a few millennia later, people know how to make that slop, and then it became what we, of course, now have this business around. But the question is, if they're making so much money off of it now, and people are suffering so horribly, why is it that no one has ever thought or taken action to go to them and go, now wait a minute, you're causing so much misery. Why don't you offset some of the pain that you're causing by helping with the treatment? And then we talk about medications. I'm not talking about the long-standing stuff that our parents and grandparents worked with. I'm talking about the opiates, and I'm talking about big pharma. So the problem is, of course, with the opiate crisis, and we all have known it's nothing new, that originally when the over-the-counter medications hit, the prescription medication we were told by the big pharma companies, it's not addictive. So it was overprescribed to the point where we found ourselves now in a position where when the news says we should celebrate, there's been a drop in deaths in opiate addiction, people get excited. And I turn and go, oh, what are we excited about? So anyway, yeah, you're right. It's quite an idea. I don't know if it'll ever take traction, but
We have a goal. It has to start with a thought.
Well, what's interesting is you've been at it for a while now. You're a photographer.
Yes.
And your photography, let's just touch a little bit about, who you are and what you do. You have a corporate background.
Yes, I was in 35 years in healthcare. So I was a chief operating officer of a 1,000-employee company in Maine. I got there, and 6 months after I arrived back 8 years ago, I was arrested 3 times in 3 months for drunk driving. And I had a suicide attempt and ended up in a psychiatric hospital. And it was not good, but in the end, I got such support that who would expect a COO with 3 arrests to not get terminated? And I didn't. They hung behind me. They sent me to rehab, and I learned a lot about life and about myself. And when I got back, it was a struggle. And then out of pure happenstance, I discovered photography. And it's not just a hobby. It was a way of expressing myself and getting through hard times. I mean, an alcoholic in the evening who's trying to get through that night, instead of it being a chore, or I would grab a camera and go sit out on the Gay Head Cliffs. And I would connect to something so peaceful that the need for alcohol would disappear. And then a few years after that, I decided to start writing about it and talking about it so that I could help others, that reduce the stigma associated with it. I have diagnosed bipolar disorder. I have alcoholism. I try to talk about it so that people are more comfortable with the subject and more accepting. And it's not all about helping other people. When I do that, it helps me too. I mean, let's face it, I need to stay sober, and it's not always an easy thing to do. And if you can say, look, hey, you're a good person because you're helping other people, it helps build you up, and it makes it easier for you to feel, some self-love. And so it's been a really good thing that I decided to get into.
I'll say. Yeah. Talk about God winks. That's a nod to Louise and Squire. You have been blessed with these opportunities for insight, and then you were able to capitalize on it. Amazing. I mean, the fact that, number one, that you were allowed to go back.
Yeah.
Number two, you found photography. Number 2.5, have you seen his stuff? It's...
You're very sweet.
Not me. I haven't bought a single piece. No, I'm not that sweet. Let me tell you, it's amazing. And my daughter is really into it, so I get to see through her eyes, that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a pat on the back there. But the point being, you were able to, for some reason, come back to Earth. You had gone off on your planetary trip around a few other planets, and you landed both with your feet on the ground. And clearly, it's just, you look at the nature of who you are, and we don't know each other that well, but in the short time we've got to know each other, clearly you come from pretty good stock there. You started with something that was pretty darn strong, and the fact that alcohol took over doesn't have anything to do with your personality, anything to do with your with who you are. It's a disease.
Yes, now it doesn't. There was a time when in the end, when I went down, I poured more bottles of vodka down the sink than I drank. It was a tortured existence where you went to in Maine it was great because all the pharmacies, which said, looking out after your health on the front door, had vodka. So I would go in and I would drink, the pharmacies did, Rite Aid. I'd go to Rite Aid, grab a quart, take a swig, get a little buzz, and then say, "That's it, Mike, you're done." Pour it down the drain, and then when it wore off an hour later, I'd go back. And when your existence is just around the substance, you aren't the same person because you're chasing something you're never going to find. And I think what's really important about this show, what I'd really like to see happen is that if we do this on a weekly basis and people tune into this show and they can walk away with one knowing that they didn't have before they left. And I think I think by telling our story, maybe there will be something that pops up. With me, after 35 years of torture, there was one gentleman, a physician, who said something to me that clicked. So I have so many parents and others that say, "I'm giving up. My child has been into 11 rehabs, and when does this end? When does it end?" And I try to be an example of someone that says sometimes it takes a kind word from one person to make all the difference, and you never give up hope. And so I'm really hoping that by telling our story and being involved here, that even if we can save one person somehow by talking about these issues, it would make this a really cool show to have. So
which is why I'm here.
Yeah.
You came full circle back to the intro, and our conversation pulled me away from, as I was giving the statistics.
Yeah.
The importance of sharing the statistics weren't for anything other than what I'm about to say. The numbers of these statistics tend to blind me when I hear of thousands of this and tens of thousands of that. But what happened is that, how about this for a statistic? A lifelong friend of my son's passed a few months ago because of his engagement with substances. One. That's the number that I hope that has meaning for you, anyone who's listening to this or watching. Because we get blinded by these distractions of the media, statistics, and what have you. And I think the thing which is sort of, I don't think I was ever intentionally full of myself. I'm sure I came off that way at times and probably still do. But the bottom line is, in losing Joey, it knocked all the wind out of me.
Yeah.
And I grew so humbled. And I dragged my feet. And I'm still dragging my feet. I don't feel so good about life nowadays. That pain is with me. And it got me. Yeah. So the intentions are for us to share the kind of things that Mike's been going through, and through his eyes, be able to help, as we have guests on the show, share their vision, share their experiences. I'll jump in and say that I'm here by the grace of God. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be alive. I was brought into, through a family, phenomenal love. My family was incredible. My parents, cousins, extended family, it was all supportive and encouraging and loving. But it was in the 60s. I was born in 54. And I joke about that, I survived the age of Aquarius. And I don't know how. Because in my family, it wasn't what drugs are you doing? It's here are the best that we can get. If you're starting to kind of twitch a little bit, it's because, wait a minute, this is upper middle class family that had everything. And for us, being stoned was a matter of course. The liquor closet my parents had was phenomenal. And we had an electric bong, this thing, a plexiglass thing with a 6-foot hose that was in our living room. This is in the early 70s. And it was amazing. We followed the dead. And we had musicians, and some of them very well-known musicians, would come over, and the amount of drugs, the amount of cocaine. I tell this story. It's an amazing story. Well, I'll save it for another time, where my mother walks in and blew my friends away, that she didn't freak out, quite to the opposite. I went down a path of walking one foot in academia and the other foot in abject despair. I was suffering with a type of depression, which I still am having difficulty figuring out, because I was able to resolve it afterwards. But during the course of those 10 years, I would spend 3 or 4 months in doing well in school and everything was doing great. But then there would be a turn and I'd slip off and then I'd go down. And I would find myself doing everything. I ended up doing crank in Colorado. This is pre-meth. And it was bathtub crank. And I remember going over to some guy's house who reminded me of Heisenberg and shooting it up, and then going down to Atlantic City and getting involved in heroin and shooting up heroin. But then for this mystery for me of finding a way back. And then ultimately for me hitting a tree. There was this story that I tell, and if the state trooper is still alive, God bless you. I had no idea that I was being pursued by the staties in my Ford LTD, and I had a ton of, I had Quaaludes and I had all sorts of stuff on me, and I'd been drinking, and I didn't negotiate a turn. I hit the tree's up at an angle, and this guy drags me out. It's a state trooper. Yeah. And he pulls me into his car, not an ambulance, brings me to Long Branch Hospital, and I tell him my entire life story, and his radio went off, and he disappeared. No summons, no court, no legal, no nothing. A few stitches and I was off. And I'm waiting for the axe to drop. And I've been waiting ever since. And my life got, it got less and less silly, less and less, there were times that I still get, follow some path for a little bit, but all that serious hanky-panky went away.
It was a moment, and you grabbed the moment, and it had an impact on for you for the rest of your life. Yeah.
And there were several more, and this is the thing that I like to share with folks. One event isn't going to necessarily do it. Sometimes it does. But then for me, meeting my wife, this one particular person, that changed my life even more, to the point where the hanky-panky started to disappear, to the point where I'm totally sober. It's been, many years now. Yeah. And it's interesting in that I went from a position where I wouldn't have hired me, I wouldn't have had me working for myself, to looking back and seeing. But I consider myself, I'm a good-hearted guy. I mean, the addiction really toyed with me, and I came so close. But don't get me wrong, I have a couple of OUIs. Yeah. So I was able to party with the worst of them, and I paid a pretty interesting price, which led me back into community services, which led me to running the program. So I went full circle and then some. But the one thing that I'll drop off on this, most people who get an OUI in Martha's Vineyard have to go to the OUI class, and they go to their class for, 16 weeks. 16 weeks of the Howie show, as it was for a few years. Well, Howie went through that 15 times.
That's got to be a record. That's amazing.
I went through it 15 times. And that's what it took.
Yeah.
Can you imagine showing up for this class and looking into this new group, and for me to think, not here we go again, but okay, let's try it one more time.
It is a disease. I went to my OUI class, but I would stop and get vodka nips on my way in.
Many did. Many did.
What you did is you chewed gum because you were in the class to teach you about, responsible use of alcohol, not drinking
and
while you're driving.
When I walked past you, you would sit back and we'd be talking this direction.
Yeah, exactly.
People think I didn't know.
But
that was so funny.
I actually have a photograph that sits in the New Paths room over at Martha's Vineyard Community Services, and it's of Moshe Beach, and it shows two paths coming to a bright light over the beach, meant to signify that there are multiple paths to getting healing, right? There's not just one way. There's also not one way to get into a downward spiral. Here's you with your background. I was a marathon runner. And I ran for years. I ran in 15 marathons. I ran 252, which is pretty good in the Boston Marathon. I was in 3 times. And I got hooked on the endorphins. And as I did research in my master's in psychology, athletes do tend to, besides the cultural issue, football games, you got a beer on the billboard, you got a tailgate with Budweiser, you've got to, got scuba diving. When I was learning scuba divers always bring a 6-pack because when you come up out of the water alive, you got to down some cold ones. So a lot of athletics is related to alcohol because of the party after the celebration, and eventually, as my body wore down and I couldn't generate as many endorphins, it ended up being more of a push to drink alcohol. And so there's many ways of getting to that downward spiral. You were just a crazy person with Quaaludes and heroin, and I was just somebody who. I took 35 years to fine-tune my downward progression, and so that's what makes it really hard. I was bringing vodka and water bottles to work as a COO, and I would drink just enough so that I could keep something in my system because I got to the point where I didn't think I could be an executive presence or a good manager or a good anything without some alcohol in my system. My brain had me convinced of that. And only once did my boss come in and you could tell he could smell alcohol. But other than that, I functioned quite well. I'd go to dinner and leave a half a glass of wine on the table. Little did they know I drank a 5th of vodka before I went to dinner because I had a strategy to make sure nobody would know. And frequently you and I both hear, I can't believe this person is an alcoholic because you would have never known it. So there's cases where you're just, it's just a tough disease and it has many paths to getting to the end. So.
Yeah, I'll say. But for whatever reasons, fate had brought you here, it brought you to being motivated to do something about it. I guess the biggest question that I have for you is what prompts you to take action? I mean, it's great that you've recovered. It's fantastic. And normally you would think that people would, okay, no, I'm kind of getting my act back together and get back into an industry and hunker down, put my nose down, and make sparks in that way. But what has motivated you to reaching out?
I feel, and it's a hard decision for anybody that's an alcoholic, an addict, or whatever. This whole anonymity, put a bag over your head. When I finally, I was sober and I was living a mediocre life for 2 years, and that's when I discovered photography. And then because I was still kind of like still like just a sober alcoholic, I posted some pictures and people loved them. And I said, oh, I'm going to be the best photographer on Martha's Vineyard. I'm going to beat everybody else. And I started to do that, and it was so empty. And then one day I said, I'm going to just tell, I hate being like, I don't want anybody to know about me. And then I said, I better be careful what I say. I'm coming out of the closet, and I want to write along with the picture. So if the picture said to me, turmoil, but there's light over there. You can be in turmoil, but there's a light there, and if you just love yourself, you'll find the light. I don't know why that clicked in my head, so I wrote it down, and then I put the picture and I wrote the words. And people said, holy crap, I like that, and that resonates with me. And I did it again. And so part of it's like, I get this positive feedback. It makes me feel good as a person because many of us who went down the path have low self-esteem. I still fight it. And to have somebody say you did good and you helped me was like such an amazing feeling inside. And I get emotional about it. It's like, it was such a cool thing. And I said, you know what? This whole new life of photography is not about pictures. It's about helping people with the pictures. And then I just kept going. And then I felt so free because now I could walk down the street and I could sit here in front of a TV camera and say, I have bipolar disease. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and not worry about judgment because I'm being authentic. And I think being an authentic person is such an important thing. And it's just liberating, and I highly recommend it.
Well, I love that. And authenticity is probably I think we're going to probably make T-shirts or something like this. There's something here about this, because what you've been working on and what I've been working on behind the scenes are these programs which will drop the walls, the petitions, lower the hurdles between families to talk, to allow people to share their feelings without intimidation, embarrassment, and shame. So that we can work as a community without the fear of retribution or the social stigma. Yeah. I mean, look at me. I've been able to thread all of these negativisms about something which you've dropped completely. You literally just said, hey, this is who I am. Yeah. I'm an alcoholic. I have got this medical condition. I've got a psych condition. It's something, and I am good. And isn't that the only thing that matters? You're good. I mean, come on. Psych condition in America in 2018, come on. Anxiety, depression, PTS, post-traumatic issues, trauma. Listen, we all suffer pieces of these issues. The DSM-5 has pathologized human existence. In other words, they've recognized, the people that created this diagnostic manual have recognized that there are behaviors of which, if we isolate them and amplify them, can be diagnosed as a disorder. Yeah. However, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily a real disorder, in other words, getting in our way, ruining our lives. They're just pieces of our life. When they get out of control, when they become the component which redirects our energies in a negative way and we suffer the consequences and we can't stop from doing it, that becomes the disorder. Of course, in criteria it's much more, but in a thumbnail sketch, there you go. But the point is, you've accepted who you are, and you've looked out and said, I need more help, in the way that I want to help is going to help me. And damn it, it does.
And what it does is the authentic part is, and imagine you're a 17-year-old high school student here on Martha's Vineyard. You won't talk to anybody. You are tightened up. You're tight-lipped. You're having anxiety issues, other kinds of problems. And then some guy comes along, some 61-year-old guy, and he leaves a book with you. And I wrote a book. It's all sold out. I'm not trying to sell books. You leave a book and it says, I had 3 DUIs. I tried to commit suicide. I went and I suffered and I came back. The 17-year-old kid reads that and says, oh my God, this guy is worse than me. He's real. I'm going to talk to this guy. And the authentic piece is what's really cool about it, because by doing that, what I didn't realize is that someone will come out and talk to you that wouldn't maybe talk to anybody else. It has nothing to do that I have any magic. It just has to do that you're out there, you're an open book, you're looked at as truthful, you're looked at somebody that you can trust. And so what I've been able to do is connect with a lot of kids and other people on the island by being open that way. It just works for me. I'm not suggesting, I've had people say to me, I'm a recovering alcoholic, I'm not a good person because I don't do what he does, I don't publicize it. And I say, that's not the point. You might be able to pull somebody aside at an AA meeting and make all the difference in the world in that person's life, being in a private setting like that. There's nothing wrong with that, So we all have many paths to getting there. And mine's been a real amazing experience, and I wouldn't go back really and change a thing. So it's been cool.
Isn't that something? I do talk to folks often who go through the mill of the trauma of their struggle to get that alien of addiction out of them. And when they've succeeded, they'll turn to me and say, I wouldn't change a thing. It's like, that's amazing. It's amazing, because the strength that we get out of the results of fighting, overcoming, and the new accomplishment trumps everything. And I think one of the reasons why I enjoy spending time with you, Michael, is just that you muscled through. You've shown it can be done, and it can be done with grace. And it can be done with enthusiasm and empowerment. But you see, you imbue that. You did. Yeah. When I met you in your studio, I was just, like I said, the photography was one thing, but it was the manner in which you speak about it. So it's clear to me that you've got a wonderful energy, and I pray to God that the folks on the island are able to open their hearts to accept more of the vision of what Michael Blanchard brings to the table. So I think that's a pretty good jumping off spot for today.
All right, enjoyed it. Love you, brother.
Hey,
It's been a good session. Appreciate it. Hopefully people get some good things out of it.
let's hope we can keep going with this. All right, well, in the future, we will, it is my intention to have guests, and we will probably have them either personally with us or through Skype. But until then, we'll be taking another look at things in the future. And all right, well, for now,
Have a great
good
week.
enough.
All right, enjoyed it.
Thank you very
All right.
much. If we all drip one drop of sanity back into the bucket of our society, we just might end up filling the pool enough to give the next generation a little safer world. I've got a saying to describe my efforts. The best I can do is the best I can do, and I will. This brings us to the end of another edition of Addiction. Got a minute? I wish you warm breezes and clear sailing.